What's going on, everybody? We are back. We got episode number 3 of the Club and Sub DFS show. We got myself, as usual, John Stargarian MMA on Twitter at MMA Fox, and Luke at SWR_betting. As usual, we are brought to you by Bet Online. We got myself, as usual, John Stargarian MMA on Twitter at MMA Fox, and Luke at there we go. Minor technical glitch. Yeah, we're brought to you by Bet Online. You can get 50% bonus on your first deposit up to $1,000 when you deposit there using the promo code CLUBSUB. Great book for MMA, probably the best that's out there. And yeah, so if you like the show, if you like what we're doing, please smash the like button and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. It would be extremely helpful for us. Yeah, so we're going to just take you through the DFS of this, what so far has shockingly not had a single fight canceled. We have a crazy 15 fight slate here. I feel like we're going to lose 2 or 3 fights tomorrow. I feel like it's inevitable. I've been waiting every day, and it's still hasn't happened. So maybe we won't. But yeah, let's get right into it. I guess let's start with the 9K range. It's a bit weird this week. You want to just give your general thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I think, conventional wisdom, Blaydes at 9.4, despite him being, the highest priced guy. If there's anybody out there, I think just in general, regardless of, this slate in general, to pay up for at 9.4K, it has to be Blaydes. The amount of points that he's been able to put up in wins is just astronomical. And then you just factor in the individual matchup in and of itself where, he's fighting a guy in Derek Lewis who defends takedowns at roughly 50%. Those should come easy. And I guess I'm also more on the side that I think Blaydes is pretty live for a ground and pound finish when he opens up too. So, and even in the sense that doesn't happen, I think he'll still score pretty highly in a decision. We saw him put up a crazy number. I don't have it off the top of my head, but against Volkov. Yeah, 173. That's just absolutely unreal. So obviously Blaydes is my number one at the top. 2, I guess, is a little interesting. I think conventional wisdom would probably be to throw Aspinall right there. But I feel like that's going to also be the kind of common angle. And for me, being more so on the side of him being largely unproven, I think Arlovsky having a potential path to win here in an extended fight. We still don't know Aspinall's gas tank. So if he isn't able to kill him, I think that gives credence to Arlovsky. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, it's just another slate where I don't know if I necessarily want to go in with the conventional wisdom of, Blaydes, 1, Aspinall 2. So Spivak at 9.1, I think is interesting a little bit for me, just because I think he could land a decent amount of takedowns, get some top control, better technical boxer. I know Vandera is pretty durable historically, but I do think Spivak has some knockout upside on the feet and even maybe a ground and pound type finish. So that's kind of sneaky for me. Vieira, I think she's probably live to win inside the distance too, but it's just more so when she decides to take it there. And with Blaydes at 1 for me at 9.4, Aspinall with, being live for a knockout, Spivak being live for a knockout too, it's hard for me to prioritize Vieira in that top. And then rounding it out for me at the bottom at 9K is close. I actually played him by decision. I just think in this top 5 rung, he's at the bottom of the barrel for me.
Yeah, I probably won't roster close at all, even if I do 100 to 150 lineups, to be honest. It's just it's so hard to imagine him outscoring 3 other people in the 9K range, which, if we're being honest, is probably what he needs to do to pay off his price here. It just doesn't seem very likely. Yeah, you nailed it with Blaydes. I was just looking, he's crossed in wins 120 points 4 times. He's crossed 130 points 3 times. Maybe he finishes Lewis early and doesn't hit that plateau. But if Lewis does his normal survival thing, I think Blaydes in a win 130, 140 is very live. I can't say I'm going to have 100% of him just because it's weird. It's again, I feel like the last 2 weeks we've kind of come into this situation where it's he's going to be very owned. It's going to be kind of hard on lineup construction if you go 100%. But also in a Blaydes win, if he's on the higher end of that and this fight goes past round 3 and he wins, it's probably going to be impossible to hit optimal without Blaydes, to be honest. If Blaydes scores 135 points, he's going to be on optimal. It does in almost certainty. So I mean, I'm going to be massively exposed to him. Like I said yesterday on our pod, I bet Lewis. I don't really, or Blaydes, I don't give Lewis much of a chance here. I don't really like Vieira, except Gianna's so bad off her back that maybe she could finish her. Like, probably a decent leverage play because I think she'll be pretty under-owned. And yeah, I mean, Aspinall, his best path to victory is probably a quick finish. But, you and I were just talking about this before we went on. Like, what happens if he wins a decision and it gets out of round one and Arlovsky gets his normal grindy type pace going on? You could very well see Aspinall in that 60, 65, 70 range in a win, which, isn't helping you at 9.2. And yeah, I kind of feel the same way you do about Spivak. Yes, like I don't really love the 9K range. Like I love Blaydes. I think you have to have some exposure to Aspinall, maybe sprinkles on Spivak and Vieira, but I don't feel particularly passionately about any of them, to be honest. So let's jump into the 8K. This is a weird range, to be honest, especially because I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have like 10, 11 fighters in this 8K range. So it's pretty odd for construction wise. And like, just looking at it, I don't like a ton here. Like Rodriguez and Rosa, I'd probably take them off the board right away, even though Rosa probably like what's your thinking? Let's just chat about this real quick. What's your projection on Rosa here? Because like obviously, given Minner's history, the finish is likely, but I'm kind of thinking, if it's one-way traffic for 9 minutes and then he subs him in round 2, or even worse, subs him in round 3, you're looking at maybe 55, 60 points. What do you think?
Yeah, that's, I guess, kind of my feeling too. I am on the under 2.5 for a bet, so I am more inclined to think that Rosa probably subs him, in the second or third. But to your point, Minner is going to throw the kitchen sink at him early, so I think with that, he might spend a very decent chunk of the first part of the fight just defending. So he's not necessarily going to be potentially scoring takedowns necessarily, reversals, potentially maybe. But I think that also just kind of is what limits his upside, even if that win condition does come. So it's at that 8.9 to 8.6 range. It's hard for me to, I guess, prioritize him. I'm going to have some of him. But there's two other guys in this 8.9 to 8.6 that I like better than Rosa.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, even in the event of a first round finish by Rosa, you could be looking at like 91, 92 points and still not enough for optimal. Like really, that's and that seems to be, because I think we both know Minner's going to come out like a firecracker. That's probably his best win condition, or not best win condition round 1, but that's like the optimal for him is maybe reversing Minner in the first round and subbing him. And that might pay enough if it's a weird slate, but it's no guarantee. So yeah, I'm pretty low on him, even though he's got a good chance to finish. I'm fairly low on Draco, who I don't know what his projected ownership's looking like. I have to imagine he's going to be fairly low owned, given distance is like minus 50. Like Danny Chavez, I touched on this a lot yesterday, and I'll touch on it when we get to Gordon, but I think he might be popular, but I'm fairly low on him too. I kind of think if he doesn't KO Jared Gordon in the first 3 minutes, it's probably not going to, even in a decision win, he's probably not going to score very highly. The guys that really kind of stick out to me here, and I don't know, Luke, do you want to go like down to 8.5? Like, let's just go through 8.9 to 8.5 and then just cut it into 2 separate tiers here?
Yeah, that's kind of how I did it. I just chopped it up into 2 because we got so many.
Yeah, so 8, 6, and above, the guys that really stick out to me are Daukaus and Emmers. Pretty much like, I think we all know if Daukaus wins this, it's probably going to be a fairly quick finish, to be honest. Like, Olenek just probably doesn't have the durability at this point to take his shots. So even if Olenek can make it grimy in round 1 and Daukaus finishes round 2, he probably gets the knockout, which probably comes with a knockdown as well. So not a lock to make optimal, but I kind of think most of his win condition is in round 1. And then, I really don't like Rafael Alves. Like, I actually kind of lean Sabatini in the fight. And again, kind of similar to Chavez, who we'll get to in the next tier, I kind of think if Alves doesn't KO Sabatini in the first round, it's going to be almost impossible for him to pay off that price tag. Like, he has no volume, really. I don't really think submission upside is going to be available in this fight. And so at 8.9, he doesn't interest me. The guy that actually does interest me a lot is Jamal Emmers. He had 109 points in his last fight against Vince Cachero. And obviously Skelly is better than Cachero, but Skelly, not the best cardio, 33% takedown defense. Seeing Emmers come out, in a win, it would not shock me if he lands like 80 to 100 strikes, 4 to 5 takedowns, and gets a ton of control time. I also think he's pretty live for a finish in round 2 and round 3 here. And I don't think he's going to be super highly owned given the rest of this card and the rest of the fights that are lined to end ITD. So I like Emmers a lot here. Him and Dawkins are the only guys I'm particularly passionate about at 86 and above. How about you, Luke?
Yeah, I'm pretty much exactly right there with you too. It's number one for Dawkins for me. I got to bet on Dawkins as well. Like I said, might be a little hairy in terms of going against Olynyk. We'll get to him, but I think he's definitely pretty live for a knockout. And being that he's the lowest kind of priced guy in this moderate upper 8K range, I think you're going to save a little bit of salary on that. So I really like him not only based on upside but based on price. As well. And then obviously your point with Emmers too, he's kind of my second consideration, this upper 8K tier, because, I think he will throw a decent amount of volume here. You touched on, I do think he has pats on the ground for takedowns, potential control as well, and could potentially be live for knockout. So yeah, not to repeat exactly what you said, but I'm pretty much right there with you, dude, in this upper range. It's definitely 1 and 2. Dawkins for me. We already touched on Rosa, and then I probably won't have a ton of exposure to Rodriguez and Alves at 8.9 because I just don't really. I see finishing upside obviously from Alves, but I just think based on the style of the fight that win condition for him is more so limited against a guy like Sabatini, and then Rodriguez. I'm just not necessarily convinced he subs Zahabi, and his takedowns. His striking still kind of up in the air. So it's at 8.7. It's kind of hard to pay up for him with still a lot of unknowns. But he could end up being just a complete wild card in here. So I'll probably maybe have a tad bit of exposure to him in like large field tournaments. But yeah, it's just tough, man.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he could knock out Zahabi. I mean, we really don't know anything about his boxing at all, so that just kind of makes that fight in general kind of weird. But yeah, let's move to 8.5 to 8,000. You want to start here? Any general thoughts on this range?
Yeah, so number one for me in this range is Phil Hawes at 8.2. I think I was reading originally when these guys were booked to fight. I think Hawes was salaried up at 8.8K. So I think that's kind of interesting. So to grab him at 8.2, obviously, his win conditions largely predicated on an early knockout, at least in what we assume. But I'm also more of the stance in a little bit of a contrarian way that I think he can potentially actually have more wrestling success in this fight than he has historically. So I think he has some upside on the ground there as well. So at 8.2, I like him. Then my girl Casey O'Neill at 8.5. She's kind of my second slot because as I've if you guys listened to the Club at Sub Pod the other night, went on my little tangent about the fight. But I just think she has a pretty clear path on the ground here. On the feet, she's pretty high volume and willing to score strikes. I think she's going to be able to land takedowns here with that sub threat live or even potentially a ground and pound finish. So at 8.5, I like her. Arosa at 8.1 is a little interesting, but I'm more so on the side of Landwehr, but it's going to be a high volume back and forth fight, but I think he could potentially be live for a sub. And then I guess Chavez and Castaneda are kind of rounding out the bottom of this range for me. So I know I'm going to be probably a little contrarian to most people in this part of it. I just don't like necessarily the volume components. Castaneda hasn't shown a lot of power. I don't think he's going to be able to get going on his wrestling as he has historically in a matchup against Eddie Wineland. But, the durability of Eddie Wineland is what it is. So, maybe I'm not giving enough credence to a potential Castaneda knockout. And Chavez, it's just a little tough for me because I guess I more so lean Gordon in the fight. And I think Gordon might be able to have some wrestling grappling success to limit some of that knockout potential at Chavez. So, yeah, my big two at this range are probably Hawes, O'Neill, and then I guess I give some credence to Landwehr at 8.1. I don't like Imavov at 8K personally.
Yeah, so I'm like right there with you, Castaneda, which I know again it's kind of like a weird take, but like it's kind of weird because I think there may be some assumption after his last fight that Wineland's going to be pretty easy to put out, whereas there's just not. To me, getting nuked by a guy who's a hitter like Sean O'Malley at 135 isn't really anything overly concerning. The age is more concerning. But like I saw people talking about Popov hurting him, but like Popov hits pretty hard as well. It's not like, yeah, Wineland fights with his hands down, but I don't know. I kind of think I haven't seen anything to make me think we're at the stage of his career where Wineland's like durability is just totally cracked. And so I'm kind of with you because I think the only way I think you mentioned it on the podcast last night, like Wineland's takedown defense is historically good. The only real way I see Castaneda hitting optimal is with a finish. And I really, really think that's a low outcome. And unless that happens in the first round, I don't think he has kind of the point scoring tools to really put up a bunch of points with the second or third round finish and hit optimal personally. I'm with you on Chavez as well. Look, I mean, this is kind of the story of this entire slate, to be honest, because like Chavez obviously has the potential to score 100 points and knock Gordon out early. But if he doesn't hit that win condition, I think he's unlikely to win the fight. But even if he does, he scored 74 against TJ Brown, and that's just not going to get it done at 84K. You know, even if his volume is a bit better or you add a knockdown, maybe 90 points get you there. I'm a little skeptical of that. So I'm going to – will I full fade him? I don't – probably. I don't really love him. To be honest, a little bit of contrarian take. I think my favorite fighter in this range is Landwehr, just because, you know, we've seen Erosa separated from consciousness so many times in his career at this point, and I think we can say with a good degree of certainty that this is going to probably be a war. A lot of swinging in the pocket. And so it's kind of like one of those fights that Landwehr could easily, in a loss, which obviously you don't really want for a GPP, but put up 110 strikes and go over 50. In a win by decision, he's probably bottoming out at 80, 85 with upside of 110 in that range. And then I also, you know, I'm with you on Hawes. I like him a lot. I think his best win condition is an early finish. So, yeah, that's kind of my thoughts here. I kind of like Casey O'Neill just because I kind of think if a win for Casey O'Neill is predicated on grappling dominance and with the new scoring system, it's, you know, that's what you're looking for. So I like her, but I'm also not as high on her in this fight as you are. But yeah, so let's move on. Let's talk real quick about Jared Gordon. What are your thoughts here on Gordon? Obviously, you know what my thoughts are on the fight, but in terms of what his scoring potential is, like Chavez seemed to show good takedown defense last night. Do you think he can put up a big score without having massive grappling success?
I think he could. I mean, you look at Jared Gordon's wins historically, he's putting up, you know, 100 plus points in damn near all of his wins. Like I said, he's more proven, more battle tested. At 7.8, yeah, I think he's definitely viable. I know that's probably going to be a contrarian take for most people in DK, but honestly, this is kind of a week where I'm definitely fine with taking a few more different stances. Just with, you know, 15 fights on it. So I do think actually Gordon is viable at 7.8, assuming, you know, I shouldn't say assuming he's able to get up on the wrestling. I'm actually just more of the opinion that I think he actually will have wrestling success here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, obviously, since I bet him as big as I did. But actually, if you actually look at Gordon's 4 wins in the UFC, he has never scored below 100 points, and he's broken 120 twice. So, I mean, I think I'm going to be heavily exposed to him. And then let's just talk about this range in general, because you and I think we're having a pretty interesting conversation before we went live here. How do you plan to approach it? Because, like, let's talk about those 3 that we specifically had highlighted. Olenek, Minner, and Skelly. My personal opinion, even though I'm on Minner sub, is all 3 are likely to lose. But also, if all 3 win, just given their general win condition, any of them that win is probably going to be optimal. So, like, what's your thoughts in terms of construction? How would you put together ownership with that?
I don't really have a strong opinion, I guess, for any of them, because I'm also more of the opinion that all 3 of them lose as well. But as you touched on, you know, if they get W's, they're probably going to score highly, and that's kind of where the, you know, optimal conversation comes in, because I don't think highly, I guess, of either guy in terms of win potential here. I'm probably going to sprinkle and kind of spread my exposure around to all of them. I probably won't put both. I should say two in that three combination that we just talked about together, because I think there are a couple other guys or fighters around them that I think are interesting that could be potentially safer and not as boomer bust, because I don't want to go as boomer bust on this bottom range. So if I'm going to go Olynyk, for example, I might throw him with a Sabatini or Zahabi if I even have to go further down into that range too. So I guess that's kind of how I'm gonna approach it, just because I think there's a chance that one of them comes through, but I don't think two of the three or even three of the three come through. So I think I'm just going to sprinkle it around.
Yeah, so I think for me here, I will probably have something like 10 to 15% exposure to each of Olynyk and Skelly, because I'm with you. Like, I'm pretty passionate about Emmers winning this fight, but obviously a Skelly win is probably predicated on an early finish, which at 7.4K is going to at least make him competitive for optimal. And, Olynyk, I kind of feel the exact same way. Like I said, when we were talking about the higher range, I like Dawkins here, but again, an Olynyk win, what has he scored in wins? He has scored 91, 105, 97, 94, 138, 95. So an Olynyk win is probably going to be good enough to get him there at his price tag. And so it's like, again, I think he's going to get knocked out, but I think if you're trying to win a GPP, you have to have at least take a couple shots at him. The guy that I really have like my focus on here is Minner. I wouldn't be shocked to see him lose this fight at all, obviously, but I do think he probably of the three has the clearest or the most likely path to victory. And if he is going to hit that path to victory like that, which is probably an early sub, I mean, it's similar to Skelly and Olynyk, really. It's, again, probably an early sub. I just kind of think Miller's explosive enough and his opponent is going to allow him to get in those dominant positions to hit it. So I kind of think Minner gets a finish at a pretty high clip here, like near 25, 30%. And if that's the case, I think you have to have pretty heavy ownership of him. I'll probably be in the 30 to 40% range on him. And then Shannon Dobson, Luke, what are your thoughts there, given that obviously she's against your girl, Casey O'Neill? What are you thinking? Are you going to roster her at all? Not roster her at all?
I'm going to have a little bit of her, but to be honest, because honestly, regardless of my opinion on the fight in general, from a DraftKings perspective, I like pretty much everybody else around her, to be honest. I like Wineland at 7.9. I like Gordon at 7.8. Oli's at 7.6. You just ran down his rap sheet if he gets a W. And I guess I want to touch on Zahabi a little quick too. I feel like he is probably going to be pretty low owned here, and I 100% understand. But I'm definitely going to have some Zahabi, I think more so just as like a leverage-based play, because we've kind of touched on even on the pod last night that there's just so many unknowns on Draco Rodriguez. And I do see a potential scenario where Draco's constantly attacking stuff, but he just doesn't get anything. And Zahabi's able to, well, one, either control top position there or even just potentially land takedowns. He is a black belt as well. He could just be the better grappler here, because I do think he's more positionally aware and just pass into dominant positions and could be live for a sub. So honestly, that's probably going to be, I'm not going to go like super overweight on him or anything. Like I said, I'm pretty much going to sprinkle this region around, but I think Zahabi at 7.5 could be an interesting leverage play potentially if you're not as high on, maybe Oli, Minner, or Skelly.
Yeah, I was talking to our buddy Miller UFC today about that fight a bit, and he was kind of saying Draco's grappling is such that we've only really seen him dominate poorer fighters, whereas we saw him get dominated by Gravely. And obviously Zahabi isn't Gravely, but like, I don't want to say Draco is insta sub, but like it could be a position where he's attacking subs and just ends up in a very bad position where the actual real black belt submits him like pretty early in this fight. So Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think it's pretty interesting, especially because let's go down to the lower half of this. So if you're trying to sit here and load up a lineup, especially if you're only entering a small amount of lineups and you're trying to fit, say, Aspinall Blaydes and like Emmers or something of that nature in your lineup, you're going to need to go at least a little bit below that 7-4 range. And down here, it's a little bit dicey. I personally don't really I don't give Lewis much of a chance, obviously. And even to be honest, let's say Lewis gets a third round knockout. Lewis might score 55 points in a win, maybe 60 points in a win. So it's like you're still probably not talking enough to cover that. And Yana, again, her upside in a win is probably very low. And so kind of the two guys that I'm really looking at down here are, this is going to pay me to say this, Jared Vanderaa and Pat Sabatini. I kind of think a Sabatini win is predicated on being very grapple heavy, controlling the clinch and controlling top time, and him getting to that 75, 85 point range in a win is very possible. And also just in general, I know Alves is the one who's known for his jiu-jitsu. I'm fairly certain Sabatini's the better submission grappler, and it wouldn't shock me at all if he got a sub there. On Vanderaa, I think he's terrible, but it's a heavyweight fight, and at least, unlike Arlovsky, the other heavyweight down there, we know Vanderaa will swing or go for takedowns. So there's at least that upside, whereas Arlovsky, you're probably looking at him scoring 50 in a win. What are your thoughts on that range? Anybody in there that you're willing to target?
Yeah, Sabatini's number one for me. You kind of hit on all the points. I think he could score pretty well, if he's able to just get a lot of ride time. Just kind of running it in my head, if he was able to get, roughly 10 minutes of control time, that's like 18 points, score 2 or 3 takedowns, that's getting you to 33 without any significant strikes, decision win, throw some significant strikes in there, getting them maybe 7. What's that?
Total strikes now too.
Yeah, total strikes now too. So, I mean, that could get him, to 70, 75 points, and at 7.3, that could be enough. But once again, it kind of goes, we were talking about this before we went live, that there are those kind of, in my opinion, these kind of wild card, more so boomer bust dogs with Oleinik, Minner, and Skelly. Whereas if 2 of those hit, then you're kind of effed with the take I just gave. But I mean, that's the game we play though. So yeah, I think there's some upside there. Yeah, for me, actually more so liking Spivak in that upper 9 range. I have to be with you as well that I'm going to have some Vanderaa, because like you said, I'm still overtly not sold on Spivak as fighter. Like you said, it's heavyweight fight. So I'm going to have some there. Pena's a little interesting to me, because even though I'm more so on the close decision side, I actually bet that. We were kind of talking about in the pod last night that you said, it could be a scenario where he gets one takedown, takes his back, and that just could be the round where he's just racking up control time. And, Close is defensively irresponsible. We saw him get his chin checked by Dariush. If Pena can get into that, flow state rhythm, he's long, he's fast. There could be knockdown potential. I don't think he finishes Close personally. But once again, when we're talking about the really dumpster diving down here, I don't think you necessarily need a finish. It just could be a matter of a win where he might be able to score some a decent amount of control time and get some decent significant strikes. I think honestly, I've been going back and forth on this dude. I think I'm just going to completely fade Lewis, which sounds kind of stupid just based on, if he wins, he's going to hit optimal or whatever. But I just think it's such a tough matchup for him with Blaydes that's just going to limit that so much. And because of that in the Lewis narrative in general, I think he's probably going to be one of the higher owned, dumpster divers on the card.
And like I said, I don't think he's necessarily guaranteed to hit optimal in a win. Like that's kind of the thing. It's like if he gets mauled for 2 rounds and lands 8 strikes in the first 2 rounds and then KOs Blaydes, like you're looking at like 58 points. Like that's probably not getting it done for you. So like I think his Lewis hitting optimal is probably Lewis is an All-American, is probably predicated on him getting a knockdown and a finish in the first 2 rounds. And again, like I think it's worth pointing out, like obviously you're targeting 10x highly slates, but there's so much high finishing potential across the board that I really think for a lot of these guys down here, 10x probably isn't getting it done. That's kind of like my one issue with Pena and why I didn't mention him. Like, we've seen him score 100 twice, but they were both in finishes. His 2 decisions, he put up 72 and 77. And, like, if you look at the fight against Steven Garcia, he got 14 minutes of control time and only put up 72 points.
Yeah.
That is wild. He just doesn't throw a lot of ground and pound. And so it's like, even though the new system should, in theory, favor somebody who's even just patting them on the head, like he just doesn't do it. And so it's like Close is pretty famous, historically durable, and hard to get out of there. I think you mentioned it last night. Benny got his back, and he managed to fight the hands perfectly. And so it's like I'm tempted. I had the same feeling. I'm just like, I can't help but think that somebody else, 1 or 2 other people, maybe even 3 in that 7K range are going to get finishes, and that'll probably cancel that out in all likelihood. But yeah, so I mean, that's kind of my thoughts on the bottom range. In terms of like just general like fights to target, are there any in particular that are standing out at you that you're probably going to have heavy on both sides of? And I see not just like a little exposure here or there.
I would probably say Dawkins, Olynyk. Gonna have a lot of exposure in that one. Arosa, Landwehr, probably both at 8.1. I'll have some exposure there on both sides. I'm trying to think a couple other ones here.
It's tough, man. It's kind of weird like that because I have some like pretty definitive feelings about each fight. And like Arosa Landwehr is the one that really sticks out to me. It's like I kind of feel like the winner's going to win a crazy volume decision or finish. But like Imavov Hawes, I don't really want to like. I mean, look at what if you had taken Imavov last time he fought Jordan Williams. Let's just say Hawes death gasses mid round 2. If he finishes round 3 and puts up the same numbers he put up against a half dead Williams, he's probably not hitting optimal at 8,000.
Yeah, especially with what we've talked about before with some of those guys in that mid-7 range and even slightly below 8, that I think there's probably, I'd say at least five guys below that 8K range that are live for finishes. So who I should say who would also probably score better than Imavov.
Honestly, this is going to sound crazy, but I actually think after Arosa Landwehr, I say this right now, and I mean, who knows what happens when I'm actually doing construction come Saturday morning. Like, I agree with you, Olynyk Dawkins, like you're gonna want both sides of that. But other than that, the other fight that kind of sticks out at me is Dobson O'Neal, because I do sort of think it's somewhat binary. And even if, like, I have a feeling that fight's gonna end inside the distance. I've been looking at the under 2.5 all week, to be honest with you. Like, even if they're let's say O'Neal can't get off on her grappling. It's like O'Neal could finish Shanna. We saw Priscilla Cachoeira do it on the feet. And conversely, Casey got finished in her first 2 amateur fights. Now, in fairness to her, she was 17 when that happened. So, you know, I'm not saying that'll happen here, but it seems like the kind of fight, like Shanna Dobson, when she gets in the fights on the feet, gets in the firefights. And so it's like Casey's either going to dominate the grappling and score well, or you're just going to have a ton of punches thrown, and one of them is going to have the opportunity to kind of break the slate. So I think that's one that I'm looking to target both sides of. And then I guess just general construction thoughts for you. Like, what are you looking? Are you going to play, you think, a wide core, pretty tight core?
I think I'm probably going to go pretty stars and scrubs here, to be honest. But in saying that, I still don't know if I'm going to have too many of, I guess 2 guys within 9K. I'm probably going to have some in there, but I'm probably going to go like 1 9K, sprinkle some in the 8s, and then I'm probably going to actually target some of this 7K range quite a bit. What's that?
Dart throw in the 7s.
Dart throw in the 7s, man. Like I said, man, I think there's some wild cards here with a lot of finishing potential, and I just in general we touched on it before. I just don't really love the 8K range overall. So from like a value or a value saving perspective on a card like this, I am kind of willing to dumpster dive around because like I said, I think there's there's roughly 5 or 6 guys that are even below that 8K range that I think will score very well at wins, who I'd rather actually pay down for than pay up in this 8K range for some spots. So that's kind of how I'm going to look to approach it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it has the kind of feeling of one of those weird cards where like 3 or 4 people in like the 7K range end up on optimal. Like just looking at it, like, because kind of like your point, like we both said, you know, Aspinall has that big upside, but the rest of the 9K range outside of Blaydes is pretty dicey. And I'm with you, like that 8K range is kind of shaky as well. So yeah, like it's funny. Last week I went with a very, very tight core, and it actually paid off just because I was massively overexposed in single entries to Viana and Usman. But I think this week it's going to be the exact opposite. And usually I try to keep it tight and just swing big, but the only people that I think I'm going to be targeting like really, really heavily are going to be Blaydes, Dawkins, and Jared Gordon in all likelihood. After that, I'm probably just going to take shots like across the board here. I like Aspinall a lot. Well, I bet Arlovsky, but you know, in terms of his potential, I obviously like Aspinall. I like Emmers, and then you touched it. Like you're just gonna kind of just dumpster dive down there in the 7K range and hope you can just build a bunch of constructions with an optimizer to maybe put enough of the finishers together to win some money here.
For sure. Yeah, and that's what's rough, at least from this 8K range, because like I said, I do like Emmers and Dawkins and then O'Neal as well. But from like a price per line perspective, you know, with all the money that's came in on Dobson, you know, O'Neal doesn't look particularly great, and Juicy at 8.5. It'd be nice if I could have picked her up at, you know, 8.3 or 8.2. Yeah. So that, I think just based on the price in general, that's probably going to limit my exposure to her a little more than I'd like. But yeah.
Well, it's also like, right there, like Blaydes, like you kind of know with, especially with Dawkins and Blaydes, with a reasonable degree of certainty that if they win, especially Blaydes will almost certainly be optimal. Dawkins probably will be. And with Gordon, it's kind of the same thing. If he puts up the numbers for his career and wins, he's probably going to be optimal too. So it's like people like that you can take heavy shots on just because you kind of know if they pull, you know, especially in Dawkins and Blaydes' case, if they do what they're supposed to do, they're going to get on there. But yeah, like Emerson O'Neal, like O'Neal probably has 120-point upside here, but she also has 50-point downside. Or, you know, maybe it's just a weird fight where it's kind of a struggle for position and she wins and scores 65, right? So
yeah, and they both bust.
Yeah. I hope that doesn't happen because I'm pretty sure I'm going to play that under 2.5. But
yeah, I've been going back and forth kicking myself. I just ended up adding on to O'Neal straight at the better line. I was thinking about going ITD on her, and then I was thinking about doing the under 2.5. But I don't fucking know.
Need to turn it into a betting show. I just have too much money out there already, man. Like it's like I want to play Sabatini, but I'm already at 2 units on the over there. Like I have 15 units of exposure to this card already, and it's pretty contrarian to the rest of the market. So things could go really, really sideways if everybody's having a big day on Saturday night.
I'm right there with you, dude. I think I'm at 12 and a half right now. So it's a big one for me too.
It's like I want to play. I want to make that play on Sabatini, and like I've been looking at Dawkins. Dude, I have a pretty strong lead in like so many fights this week, and I'm just like, okay, John, calm down. You have enough exposure there already. We don't need to try to lose $2,000 this weekend.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of hoping it would be a week where I was just like, I didn't like any favorites at all. The total sucked. And then I'd be willing to, you know, do my shot on Sabatini, my shot on Arlovsky, maybe even my little half unit on Kunitskaya, maybe some little voodoo shit there, you know, throw the Oli sub in there. But yeah, man, I got too much stuff for me to be chucking too much dog stuff around.
To be honest, in that fight, the Kunitskaya fight, like I'm with you. Like I kind of like her. I'm a little surprised that line is kind of held strong, to be honest. Because like I feel like all I've seen are Vieira takes all week, and it doesn't seem like that's moving at all, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, anything to add before we sign off this?
Just gonna cross myself every week as usual. Hope for no cancellations because man, I'm telling you what, right now, like these Saturdays, I've just learned like over the last 2 months. I'm just clearing my mornings. Sorry, dog. We're not doing the park on Saturday. No, we're doing that for Sunday because it's every Saturday. It's a frickin' fire drill where I'm just like I'm withdrawing, I'm changing, and ironically it just so happens to be fights that pull out like it was Stamen the other week that I'm like 80% exposed to. So I'm like, oh my God, dude. So I know it's coming. I know it's coming. It's like I'm past the point of frustration now, but it's like,
Dude.
I hope it's not a big targeted fight.
That was me last Saturday, and I was having issues with the optimizer I was using. And so I had to mass edit about 80 lineups after the Jill, or I had about 80 lineups entered. I probably had a mass edit about 40 of them after the Robertson Maverick fight got canceled. The amount of time that took, especially because now I'm just like adding random fighters, and occasionally I'm reduplicating the lineup and then having to go back and check. Like, it was horrible. It was probably a 2-hour process, and where I'm getting yelled at by my wife, being like, "What are you doing up there? The fight started in a couple hours. Are we gonna hang out?" And I'm like, "Yeah, give me a fucking minute."
I'm trying to win tournaments, babe.
Yeah. So, but yeah, thanks, Z. I agree with you about that. These are the cards to exploit. But yeah, guys, thanks for coming out tonight. Please drop a like, subscribe, and like I said, if you haven't deposited Bet Online yet, do it. Sign up with promo code CLUBSUB. Get a 50% bonus on your first deposit there. It's a great book, honestly, if you love betting. As if you're watching us, I'm sure you do. So thanks for coming out, guys. As usual, I'm John Stargarian. You can find me on Twitter, MMA Fox, with Luke at SWR_betting. Good luck this weekend, everybody. Take it easy.